Welcome to the Occult Rejects. In this episode, I got a bunch of us with us today. I got Jin the Ninja. Welcome, sir. What's going on? Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate it. Obviously, my boss, Mr. 33, and thank you guys for being on and working with all of you today. And I've never met Julia, Raven, or Lobster, but yeah, it's all good.
Good. Awesome. And you want to let everybody know where they can find your stuff?
Sure. So I have a show called Threshold Saints. It's really, I'm calling it serial experiments in speculative ontology. So it's like about the metafiction of magic and fiction, storytelling, narrative, all the things that we talk about whenever I'm on the show. So if you want to check that out, you can follow me on Twitter at Wukong Reborn, WUKONG Reborn, or on IG or Apple's and Spotify.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And your links will be on the bottom if they're not already. And Lisa, the mad scientist, what is going on? Thank you very much for joining us. I know you have nothing to plug, but thank you for joining us.
Wait. I do have something to plug. OccultResearchInstitute.org, our website where a lot of really cool people contribute a written form of media. So there you go.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And yeah, people go check that site out. Now to Julia. Cosmic Peach is with us. Hell yeah. What is going on, Julia? Let everybody know what your deal is and where they can find your stuff, please.
I am official Occult Reject now. This is my second time co-hosting. I'm so excited. Yeah, you can find Cosmic Peach Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, except YouTube, of course. Fuck them. And yeah, actually, I've been really digging being an Occult Reject because I've already learned so much. I love having the variety of guests on. I'm really excited about this one today too.
Oh yeah, thank you. No, and thank you for being a part of it, Julia. You're a great researcher. I appreciate the stuff you do. And the OG himself, last but not least, Robbie Marks. What is up, my man? Please let everybody know where they can find all your amazing work and your art.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Thanks for getting this group together. This is going to be a good one. Yeah, I'm R Marks or Robbie Marks. I'm an artist, and I do art for bands and festivals as well as researching. If you want to check out any of my stuff, my art, my podcast, my Patreon, you can go to my link tree, which is at RMARX, R Marks, and then I'll pull up everything.
That's what's up. And thank you very much for joining us as well, sir. And finally, to the guests of the hour. We got Raven and TOPLOBSTA from the NephilimDSquad. I went on their show. I had a blast. It was awesome. They asked great questions. They seemed really into it. And I really wanted to get them on the show as well. I guess we'll go with TOPLOBSTA first. What's up, dude? You want to introduce yourself and let everybody know who may not know who you are, what your deal is?
Yes, what's up, guys? Thank you. I am a shit poster online. I own a t-shirt company, TOPLOBSTA.com, and I do a couple of shows. One of them, NephilimDSquad, with David here. We talk about the things that you guys like. I do comedy, Tower Gang, and we do a political pseudo conspiracy show with our friend Clint Russell, which we'll be doing it, I guess, after this show, right around 2:30. It's called Dangerous, Real Talk, Real Dudes. The implied, and that's what I do. Dave, what's up?
What's up, guys? Thank you for having us. Yeah, we just did an episode with you, Nick, and we also had Robbie on, and that was a awesome conversation. We went heavy into the egg. Real heavy into the egg. Yeah, and yeah, I'm David Lee Corbo. You can find me on Twitter at David L. Corbo on Twitter, and I am one half of NephilimDSquad, 1/3 of Dangerous. Also do a show called Timeline Cleanse that probably nobody should watch because it's very abrasive and incredibly offensive. Very happy to be here, guys.
Awesome. Yeah, very happy to have you on, and especially for this topic. I guess whichever one of you want to answer this first. Who was it that even came across this guy that thought it was interesting to cover?
Oh, that was Top. Top discovered him.
Not really. It was just multiple guests. We have people on, and they come on, and they're like, yeah, anyway, so this guy was doing this thing, and I was like, what's his name? And they're like, Puharich. I was like, okay. And then it's come up like maybe 7-8 times before I said, wait a second, what the fuck is going on? In different fields of study, not just like the occult, but like science, in the science realm, in the CIA realm, in the government realm. So I'm like, okay, now we need to actually look into who this guy is. And I think the thing that broke the camel's back was William Ramsey was on the show. And he was talking about this Council of Nine, not the actual entities of the Council of Nine, but this council that this guy created to it was like a governing body sort of council that I guess they were international, and his name pops up again. So I was like, all right, that's the final straw. We've got to really look into this guy. And now everywhere we look, he's consistently popping up. We even have one field of study that we're not ready to really dive in on because we're like still expanding on what this guy's doing. But his name comes up in a very popular podcast series called the Telepathy Tapes. And it's just like, yeah, of course. When I heard it, it's like, yeah, of course he's involved with this. And I guess if you guys don't mind, we could kind of jump right into what he's doing.
Yeah. And so, but we're just real quick. You said he was involved with the telepathy tapes.
Well, it's not that he's involved with the telepathy tapes. It's that he finds his way into the conversation in virtually every topic that maybe the scientific community or the medical community would call pseudoscience. And as soon as you start delving into that realm, he pops up. You asked which one of us discovered it, and I was quick to say Top, but as Top was talking about it, it's more like he found us, right? It's really like if you are looking at the truth of, you know, the nature of the realm that we exist in, and you go back, you know, anywhere within the last 100 years, this guy is going to pop up in some way, shape, or form. We were kind of joking about him before the show, and in fact, he's even like, I don't want to get the cart ahead of the wagon or whatever the expression is here, but we found out, and I'm sure that you guys know this, he's associated with the actual tinfoil hat. Like, this is the guy that popularized the notion of the tinfoil hat. He's kind of like the conspiracy community's mascot. And this is and he's been right under our nose.
It's where he comes up in the telepathy tapes. Not necessarily with the esoteric side of it. He comes up in the beginning of an episode 2, I believe. They're talking about radio waves being frequencies that people can hear. And then they give an example of Lucille Ball. She goes and she has dental surgery, and she starts picking up radio waves somewhere in Manhattan. And right away, my radio wave antenna is up, and I'm like, what the fuck did you just say? So I'm listening, and then they go, oh yeah, by the way, a doctor, Andrej Puharich, they call him a doctor scientist. He was developing this dental implant technology that would actually put these a radio wave signal into your head.
Voice of God.
Yeah, exactly. Voice of God.
Probably a precursor to that technology.
That's some like shit.
So now, go ahead.
Yeah, so the reason we say it's related to the tinfoil hat is because there are like tangential stories of places where he may have been. And there's a guy that famously wrapped his head in tin because he was hearing voices in his head and the tin stopped it. So in this nursing home or a psychiatric facility that the guy was at, this is what he did. And the doctors allowed it. And he said it helped him. So they're like, fine. So the connotation of tinfoil hat kind of derives itself from there. But the origination is really this dude that probably is putting this stuff into his teeth. So
yeah,
it's
Top. I
fantastic.
actually remember too, the way that he came up in a big way on our radar was with Control Alt History. We had him on our show, right? And he was talking about the SpiritCom, which is a device that was created sometime in the 80s. And it was like a reliable piece of technology that people were able to communicate with something that was, you know, at the end of the day, they just said was coming from the spirit realm. But what was happening was people were coming from far and wide to try to debunk it. And over again, they were finding that it wasn't debunkable. And then I think that one of the main guys, I don't know if it wasn't Puharich, somebody that was working intimately with it eventually ends up getting diagnosed with schizophrenia, and his story ends pretty sadly. He's institutionalized, you know, for the rest of his days. So yeah, this whole thing is like, he just keeps coming up. Anything that's fascinating, you know, like the SpiritCom or like the tinfoil hat blocking these waves, it's like Puharich finds his way into the narrative somehow.
So Puharich, when you look at his early work, his first book was The Sacred Mushroom, and he's actually using fly agaric mushrooms to try to create telepathy. He actually built a Faraday cage for 2 people to sit in so that they could, test the properties, and he said there was a 25% increase in telepathy within the Faraday cage. But he's given speeches to the Department of Defense on like psychic spying. He's like, I mean, he's literally, his laboratory comes straight out of the roundtable groups, which is basically linked back to Cecil Rhodes and bringing America back under the wing of the British. It's he's just wrapped up in everything.
I think what he's finding there is actually really fascinating, right? To put people in a Faraday cage and then to find that there's a 25% increase in the success of being able to predict or read or, use some form of telepathy. I have my theories, and it's not like it's a profound one. I think a lot of us suspect that these abilities are innate to us one way or another. But I was speculating just on the phone with Top the other day that I think what's really going on here is that we're being stifled in so many different ways. So from the shit that they're spraying in the air to the things that are in our food, there's the old trope of fluoride corroding the pineal gland. But those waves, right? Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and all this different shit, cell phone signals and radio waves. I imagine that because of the nature of the ability to read thoughts, which, I'm no expert on it, but it seems to be more so the ability to receive waves, right? Waves and frequency that are being emitted by another person in the form of thought. Well, if there's a bunch of other crap, like I said, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and 5G and all these different things bombarding you constantly, it's got to be hindering that exchange that maybe actually is innate to us in one way or another. So I find that fascinating that he actually found more success, and that kind of opens the door to, which I think is still part of this conversation, Rogan promoting these John C. Lilly sensory deprivation tanks. I kind of am looking at this like we're getting something very old and we're getting it repackaged and
Also,
reinserted into the culture.
Puharich also promotes the idea of the ice bath in regard to training the body to find the inner light to be able to bring about enlightenment. So go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, NephilimDSquad. Are you familiar with the Laurel Canyon at all?
Yes.
Okay.
They're manufacturing all of our cultural phenomenons.
Right. So I talk about it a lot. Obviously, the Occult Rejects know this, but I came across Andrej Puharich in studying shit from the 60s, actually. Because he comes up. It was an episode I did about cults, and Heaven's Gate came up, and something that was adjacent to the Heaven's Gate cult was this guy named Yuri Geller and Andrej Puharich. And I did this whole fucking presentation on him, and
type of scandal.
Dude, he was up to this shit in the 60s, just Laurel Canyon days, CIA fucking program to fucking AI extraterrestrial. Like, he was all about that shit. And it blew my mind when I first heard about him, because I just didn't hear a lot of other people talking about him at the time. But I'm so glad you guys know about it.
It feels like our mascot, doesn't it?
Yeah, right.
He's like fallen through the cracks in so many ways. So a little bit about his history. He's born in 1918 in Croatia. He actually dies in 95 unexpectedly. He falls down a set of stairs and just dies like this. So like really anticlimactic way. Right. Such a fantastic life that this guy had.
Like a cat tripped him up. He
stumbled over his cat and died. The cat ate his eyelids.
It's like, what's the matter? You didn't see that one coming, bro?
Telepathy doesn't work on cats.
Yeah, the entities didn't tell you about that, right? So he had some military service, and he joined the Army Medical Corps in the 50s, and that's kind of when all of this starts off. He finds himself in Edgewood Arsenal, and exactly, see what I mean?
Frank Zappa.
I was just gonna say Frank Zappa.
Yep.
So I don't even really need to go into this. Like I had went into a deep dive after I looked into Edgewood, and I'm like, this is an entire episode. This is an entire series of episodes. So he goes there, and that's like, people speculate that could be the beginning of the program, different CIA programs that are starting from this one place. Yeah. He comes out, and I guess he writes that book soon after he writes that like in the 60s, I believe, or just before 1960, The Sacred Mushroom. And he also does some telepathy studies. But before that, like when he comes out, one of the first things that he does is he meets an Indian mystic doctor named Dr. Vinod. Dr. D.G. Vinod is this guy's name. And they hit it off, and they start to do their thing, and they start to channel some, just let's go. I guess that's what you do when you meet somebody. I don't know, in the occult, you're like, let's fucking channel stuff.
Yeah. I think you're beyond like going to, friendlies. It doesn't, like, what's the point of getting two occultists that are into telepathy together if you're going to just go and have a grand slam at Denny's? Like, you want to go and summon entities, no?
Skip the foreplay.
Skip the foreplay, yeah.
Yeah, so they just start summoning entities, I suppose. And one of the entities that comes to them, it has a name, but it doesn't really give itself a name. It's identifying itself as 9 other entities.
Yeah.
And the entities it calls itself are Atom, Shu, 10 foot, 10 foot Geb, Nut, nice, Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys, which are these are the names of the Egyptian Ennead. These
the Egyptian Ennead, baby.
Right.
These
And
9 that
From
continue to pop up.
Heliopolis.
I was talking about it a little bit too, and I'm sure we'll end up getting into it, but on TikTok there seems to be like this big renaissance, not a renaissance, I guess renaissance in the way of like going back to, because these are old spiritual principles and old entities, but they're suddenly coming into the narrative again. There's a lady that I forget what her name is, but I've been watching her on TikTok, got a Ouija board like 20 years ago and was communicating with something, her and her husband were, and they had an ongoing dialogue with this thing for 2 decades, and eventually they get a lot of information from it. It identifies itself as 7, which interestingly enough there is on you can find a book called The Council of 9 or The Council of Saturn, and it's written by 7, and it has the same message that this 7 has to this woman on TikTok. And that message is more or less like, we have to spiritually ascend, and we have to be careful because we're moving towards a calamity, some sort of a climate related, earth affecting calamity. And this is the same thing that Puharich got from the Ennead, right? This is the same thing that you see it like over and over again. It's the same thing that the Galactic Federation of Light is telling you, right? It's this council of aliens that
It reminds me of what's that book called that was channeled, The Law of One, channeled by
Oh my
Ra.
God, yo!
Doesn't it remind you of that?
Because it is the same thing. It's this narrative
read
has
those
been
things.
repeating itself so this is our contention on NephilimDSquad, is that this is a masterful rebranding, because much of the apparatus like Hollywood or NASA or the scientific community has been geared towards feeding us a narrative. And that narrative is that we are maybe not the smartest thing in the universe. There are things that are beyond us, and they're hyper advanced technologically speaking. And also, in between like shooting lasers at us and destroying our cities in like the day the earth stood still or something, there's this other narrative that begins to emerge. And that is, they're going to help us ascend, and they're very concerned with us destroying ourselves in mutually assured nuclear destruction. So
this is I wrote down exactly what they're warning of. So they warn of technology misuse, like with nuclear weapons, environmental crises, and an impending shift in human consciousness toward enlightenment or collapse.
Yeah.
So all these things are like kind of new age ideas. Then they also talk about the Galactic Federation of Light and all this stuff, like, thousands of light years away and shit like that, where you'll hear I forget the names of these Federation actors, but they're very upset with us and how we've been behaving on Earth.
yes,
So
and how we've been treating the planet.
Yeah, and what I found interesting is that it's consistently the same message from that Puharich is getting, that these other he brings a couple of other psychics or people that are
Remote viewers.
Remote viewers, and they are also channeling the 9 for about 20 plus years. It goes from like 1950 to at least 1972, and then whenever these programs they just stop, they're like, oh yeah, we just stopped, like we figured out what we needed. I have I don't fucking believe them, so it could be
That's the
going
same
on till
thing,
today.
right? When they say like, oh, the program was real, but it stopped. It's like, no, it stopped because they realized it's successful, and now they could roll it out to the masses. That's why it stopped, because it's no longer a consolidated experimentation with 1 to 2 to 3 patients and a small crew that you're working with. This is now proven. It's a reliable method, and now it's time to roll it out to the masses in the form of, the gigantic propaganda machine. I think we actually talked about that with you a little bit, Nick, when you came on NephilimDSquad, was this idea that back in the day, they'd have to strap you to a chair, Clockwork Orange style, after they kidnapped you from a whorehouse, and they'd peel your eyeballs open and they'd subject you to LSD and all of this subliminal messaging in this propaganda machine. They don't do that anymore. Now we're constantly inundating ourselves with a low-grade psychedelic in the form of the marijuana that's been, it's had the THC dialed up through the roof. And we're all constantly on this, like I said, low-grade psychedelic, and we're all constantly we've got it in our hands. Here's our little MK Ultra machine, right? It's just hitting us with all the propaganda. And so, it doesn't stop. They just say, oh, it works. It's time to roll it out and get everybody hooked on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And it's crazy to think too, because there are a few names I can think of in particular that came off like the Gaia Network. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but like David Wilcock and like all these guys.
He was part of that law.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, he's big on the law of one, and it's all the same stuff. And it's crazy because he talks about the same stuff Puharich talked about, and Puharich was notorious for working with like the Pentagon, the CIA, naval intelligence. So it's like, if you guys are going to believe this stuff about the Laurel Canyon and all that being like designed and fed to us, why not this narrative of these extraterrestrial bird feather head beings coming back, and
okay, and that's even, you just stepped in something, Julia. You don't. This morning I'm listening to a TikTok. My wife is showing me a TikTok of a guy he's like, I don't know what to do. I guess I'm going to share it with you guys. I walked into the kitchen this morning and something happened. My head snapped back and my body became paralyzed, and I was suddenly transported to a different place. And this place is like a meeting. That's what he says. He's like, I don't know. It was like a boardroom, like a meeting. And then he goes, it was like a council. I go, oh, that's funny. And then he goes, they're all talking about mankind, and they're saying that people are waking up and the time is coming, right? And he gets freaked out and somehow manages to snap out of it, looks over to his little dog. He's back in his kitchen. His dog looks concerned. Next thing you know, it starts happening again. He feels it. His body gets hot. He snaps into it. His head's looking at the ceiling, and he is now once again transported to this council, to this meeting. And that's the conversation. It just happens again. Basically, it's female voices, male voices. It seems to be, not that many people. And they're talking about mankind's ascension, and that we're all waking up and the time is coming. And then they even go, this one seems to be stronger than we thought. They always tell us that we're special. They always tell us there's nothing.
Well, that's how they sell it to you, because you have to be special. Yeah,
exactly. I want to kind of bring it back for 1 second though, because Robbie said something earlier that was like, we mulled over it, but you were saying that who was it that was using the ice bath technique? Was that Puharich?
Yeah, Puharich in the Sacred Mushroom. He talks about the Siberian shamans and how they would condition their bodies in order to be able to facilitate this astral travel. And one of the processes that he talks about is the ice bath.
Okay, so this is actually perfect, because this is something that people aren't drawing a correlation to. And it's one of the correlations that we've drawn. I'm going to go ahead and say it because there's more to what we're thinking about anyway, but this is a piece of it. And it's basically that in the telepathy tapes, for example, they're studying nonverbal autistic children. And we're on YouTube, so I'm going to use choice language here to not get you guys nuked. But there is a growing field of study that suggests that a certain medical intervention will lead to autism within children. And in fact, it's something that this administration is currently talking about, right? And that's one thing. Let's put that on the table, right? We have autistic children. How did they become autistic? Well, it's open to speculation, but eventually it leads to some sort of telepathic powers, right? Okay, let's go Montauk Project. Let's go MK Ultra. What are we doing here? We're studying the suggestibility, but also the potentiality for like latent psychic abilities in people. But how are we doing this? How are we mind controlling people? How are we splitting the mind? How are we revealing latent psychic ability? It's through, right? So you're looking at one form of, in the form of, you're looking at another form of, in like, let's say a sensationalized Stranger Things, right? Where you're taking 11 and you're putting her through this thing so she develops these powers. Or you're in an ice bath. And I know that doesn't sound too intense, but what they all equate to is disassociation.
Yeah.
There's a disassociation, a dissociative identity disorder that is at the root of being able to display these powers. Now, what I would say is that we've always been able to do it. But much like a blind person whose remaining senses become incredibly heightened, if you trap a child in their body because they're now nonverbal autistic, they're going to lean into whatever senses still exist for them that are available. So what we're seeing is weird because the narrative is such, I'm trying to do this without giving away too much, but the narrative is becoming Down syndrome and autism almost seem like the next step in human evolution. You might even call it ascension, right? And that's a weird narrative because to me, a lot of that is birthed out of some form of, especially if we come to find out, you know, soon because of RFK or something like that, that there really is something tremendously nefarious about these medical interventions that we give to children. It's a schedule that goes all the way up to like 60 some odd, you know, injections before they're a certain age. So sure, it's different. Ice bath and you know, based mind control, but is the great connecting tissue. And somehow we are getting to this point in this narrative where like this is indicative of ascension. Like these are advanced evolutionary processes that we're going through. Just anecdotally, yesterday Top is doing his other show. It's a comedy show, Tower Gang. The telepathy tapes comes up anecdotally, and every single person on the show besides Top goes, you know what, dude? I think autistic people or Down syndrome people are like evolved. They're like evolved forms. Like they're the next step in evolution.
Certain
And then
parts of the
I
mind.
just saw that guy rub shit on the walls. I don't really know about that.
Yeah. But it's like, wouldn't it be something if we all had that ability? It's just been stifled, and there's been a real long con to try to have it reemerge under a different context.
So
I'm sure
Puharich,
Elon would agree with you because they're always saying what a genius he is, and he's fucking
It's-
right,
yeah.
right.
But
All of
Puharich,
our most genius people are autists of some sort.
yeah, Puharich, he goes from that sacred mushroom book, and then he writes Beyond Telepathy, which he's using mushrooms to basically try to bring about telepathy within people.
Yeah. I really do think that there is some sort of narrative emerging, and you know, Puharich ended up leading us there, but all these different aspects all come to a crossroads, and that crossroad is like base psychic abilities, but it's coming from everywhere, right? It's coming from like the program, it's coming from the, you know, the Montauk Project, if you believe in the version that we get from Stranger Things. I know that's a sensationalized fictional, you know, piece of art, but I also understand that much truth is told in fiction, and that even the trope of like the little bald girl in the medical gown stems from stories of people that were like local and claimed to have found like kids walking around. And you know, these, once again, it's all anecdotal stories, but it all stems from some, you know, nugget of truth. And I don't know, I've been feeling a lot lately like there is this big repackaging. We talked about it a little bit on NephilimDSquad with the both of you guys. Oh, go ahead, Top.
Yeah, let's explain the repackaging part, because I feel like that's this might be like one of the unique things that we've seen from the Puharich stuff, because you'll get information from everywhere, but the idea of the 9 that he's channeling, they claim to be the Egyptian Ennead, and they give him these specific names. And we also know that like these entities, these age-old entities, don't particularly like being called by their actual name, because then they can be controlled. You'll see it with like Solomon's temple. Well, he'll have their sigil, and then they'll draw a circle around their sigil, meaning that they are now encapsulated in it. So they could, I guess the idea would be that they could control it. I don't know, Nick, you might know better than I do about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, with the Goetia, yeah, I think it's more or less of like with yourself, and I think the power of angels, or angels help you will be able to render the demons. Yeah, you have their sigils. Sometimes you'll even wear them on your garb to even show that like I'm controlling you.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, I guess it's a good point to bring it to, like, these guys don't really want you to know their names because there's a lot of power in their names. So they're constantly rebranding. And when we hear about the 9, this is another thing that started to clue me in about this 9. Like, heard it on Merkel's show. There's a guy doing a documentary about like Skinwalker Ranch, and then he brings up this Council of 9, and I'm like, all right, first time I heard it, and then it comes up again. You hear it in well, obviously the Egyptian Ennead. There's 9 of them. Greek mythology, there's the 9 muses. In Norse mythology, you have the 9 worlds, like Nilfheim, Asgard, Midgard, shit like that. In Chinese mythology, now I just started getting crazy with it, and I started searching. I was like, Chinese mythology 9. I was like, yeah, there's the 9 dragons there, the serpentine dragons that guide you throughout, into the afterlife. In Hindu mythology, you've got the Navgara, the 9 celestial bodies, which are they all have the same number, and they all have the same characteristics. Mesoamerican mythology, and then even throw in Satanism. Levian Satanism has their council of 9 is their governing body. That's below their I guess I don't know what they'd call their head person, but below them, that in their church structure, there are 9, and they sit on the council of 9. So I'm just like, yeah, of course, it's just fucking another thing to put in my pocket here with these entities and like the veneration or this idea of 9. You also have, Tesla is talking about 3, 6, 9. So 3 is I forget what that is. 6 is the number of man, and 9 is the number of like the ascension, the stars, right? So there has to be something here that we're looking at, that this number is significant, and it continues to pop up. The descriptions of these things, or at least the way that they behave, are all the same, and what they're telling the people that they're coming in contact with is all the same stuff.
Yeah, that one actually there. Shout out Marky Mark was something that Top and I heard.
That's a cult. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have a buddy, Jose Galison, who does a lot of work on the Order of 9 Angles, and we're just insisting, like, no, there's got to be a connection there. It's a satanic cult. They have their sigils and their signs and everything. Otherwise, everything about them is inherently satanic, right? In the way that they present this cult. But for some reason, people don't think it has anything to do with 9 angels. And I think there is really something there. But I kind of feel like just to go back to that rebranding thing, if these things really are age-old entities, well, then I start to look at like NASA very skeptically, and everybody looks at NASA very skeptically, rightfully so. They do quite a bit of lying, right? And so, Werner von Braun having been taken from Operation Paperclip, Jack Parsons, he works over at Jet Propulsion Laboratories. They're hand in hand with NASA. And so you really can't separate that. Like, I don't want to just say occultism. I want to say like seeking of spiritual knowledge from these technological industries like a NASA or something like that. And I look at those aforementioned institutions, and then I look at Hollywood and how they've given us like this alien narrative over all these years. And then of course the way that plays with like Lamb and the Amalantra workings and Aleister Crowley communicating with these entities. And they're all very incestually connected. And I do just feel like what we've got here is a long con to rebrand them as what I was talking about before, our benign space brothers that are here to, liberate us in one way.
That theme pops up as well. We start to get like pretty intergalactic space traveler stuff when he meets Yuri Geller. When he brings him over from Israel in the 70s, that's when we get this UFO boom. And Yuri Geller apparently is able to summon. I don't know much about Yuri Geller. He's able to summon UFOs.
Yeah. So Yuri Geller, he was in the Israeli military. He was inducted as an Israeli spy. He has, you just have to wonder, because the links between all the spy networks and the UFO and then the drugs, as far as the different hallucinogens, and how they're kind of piling all these things into, one kind of programming unit.
Mm-hmm.
He was supposedly able to bend spoons as well.
Right.
And had some kind of telepathic power. And from what I know, Yuri Geller and Andrea were besties, but they also had a bestie named Peter Herkos, who was also a supposed psychic to the stars. And he was in and about the Laurel Canyon. And Roman Polanski actually asked Peter Hurkos to come investigate the Tate murders to see who the real murderer was. Like, we didn't all know it was fucking CIA, Charles Manson. But anyways, Peter Hurkos was called in on that. And then later on, they found out that Yuri, Andrea, and Peter Hurkos were all tight with Anton LaVey. So if you want to talk about some, you know, propaganda, Satanism, angle of 9, whatever, that, I mean, it's all tied together.
It's just funny how all these guys were friends. I just wish I could be a fly in the wall during those few decades where I could see these guys all enter, because it's such a small world. You're like, I don't know, you learn about these guys independently, and then all of a sudden you find this connective tissue and you realize, yeah, they're all hanging in the same circles and they're all doing the same thing, and they kind of all birthed our modern day intelligence operations that we're still subjected to this day.
100.
So interestingly, when you look at Yuri Geller and all the, you know, he would change the hands on the watch in front of people. He would make things disappear. Like one time he was looking at a Derringer pistol and it disappeared in front of him. But the entities that they were that Yuri Geller was communicating with, being this body of 9, they were saying they're in the future, they're planning these events hundreds of thousands of years ahead of time, and it's interesting because he talks about Puharich talks about getting engulfed in a beam of light, and that there was no time, and it was essentially like, you know, only the things that were moved in time were the differences we see. And that very much complements what Philip K. Dick saw with the beam of light, and thinking that it was still the fall of Rome and modern time. And then that gets into the Black Knight satellite.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Oh, yeah, because, well, it was this idea that this pink beam shot down from this blacklight satellite that kind of programmed Philip K. Dick, right? Whereas Puharich talks about this beam that he's engulfed in, and he also talks about an 8,000-year-old satellite that was put in place that's circling the Earth, that's programming. So both Philip K. Dick and Puharich are both, and they're both tied in with MK Ultra. They're both tied in with a lot of this, you know, similar type stuff.
Did you see that recently? There was I don't know. I've tried to validate it, and it's, you know, it's just one of those things that's a little bit slippery. But there's a video going around. It's going viral on X right now, and it's allegedly a leak from 2018 from NASA of another POV of the Black Knight satellite, and it actually moves right beneath the space station or whatever. So you get this really elongated, you know, POV. It's like an 8-minute video, I think, and the thing is in the distance. It's very small, but eventually it passes underneath, and it is incredibly symmetrical. If this is real, it's incredibly symmetrical. It looks exactly like a ship. Like, it looks like something would occupy it. It doesn't look like a, you know, a kind of a chaotic rock structure. Not at all. It looks just like a ship. It looks like a really cool ship designed from like a sci-fi film. And so I just find that fascinating, that if that is real, well, it seems like the Black Knight satellite is making a reemergence in sort of the conspiracy zeitgeist.
Right.
You mentioned
sorry.
So go ahead. I'll wait.
Just real quick. To Robbie's point, and then to y'all's point about the 9. Didn't whenever Puharich was writing the Mushroom Book, he was in Oaxaca, and he was actually doing rituals with the chanitos or
yes. So now, interesting. Go ahead.
So the chanitos, I think they're from Oaxaca, and I believe in some of the stuff that we have read, they believe in like a father, son, mother, moon, or something like that, which looking at some of the oldest grimoires, that's some of the bases of the Hermeticism and alchemical concepts and theories. And the fact that the chanitos are, I'm probably saying that wrong, the fact that they kind of have that ritual predates some of, well, obviously pre-Columbian, right? But it predates a lot of the stuff with alchemical stuff. So they're also doing that. And then so you have Puharich doing that. But what's interesting with your 9 is that the Mexica, which are the Aztecs, they have a concept of 9 lords of the night. I think it has smoking mirror or lord of fire, all that stuff. And then they also have the 9 underworlds as well. But they didn't believe in a hell. They just believed in a lower type of dimensions.
Like Dante's Inferno type shit.
Mm.
Like there's 9 layers or something like
It's
that.
it's more, I think it's like the lowest heaven was like on the moon or something like that. They don't have a concept of angels and they don't have a concept of hell. They just have levels of dimensions.
Kind of like the
So-
tree of life.
That's what I
Lee,
was.
were you talking about Oaxaca, Mexico? That's what you were talking about? Oh,
Which is
I just came across something about that where they were really into like bloodletting and shit.
Oh yeah.
And like blood rituals, and so that makes sense. They're practicing some dark stuff
Right.
too.
And Oaxaca is central Mexico, and this is where a majority of all of your top tier belief systems all venture to. Mormons,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
go down to not specifically this space in Mexico, but to that region of South Mexico.
It's
So
like a
just
granddaddy religion type of basic pillar, sure. Well,
would
I
just
just
insert
wanted
that
to say,
into that.
real quick too, because I pulled up my notes from when I covered this guy, and he was investigating some type of low frequency radiation beam that the Soviet Union had been testing.
We're gonna get
And
to
he
that.
said, "Oh, okay." I was gonna say he said it did all kinds of crazy shit, and I
Actually-
think they're still probably
Yeah.
using it.
Let's bring it up. Let's fuck it. I mean, might as well.
Well,
Actually,
so before we
before
move
we-
on, I want to
Yeah, yeah.
I want to talk about Puharich and the Watchel and the mushrooms. Puharich was going to the New York Library and he was researching mushrooms, and the librarian was like, "Oh, that's weird. There's only one other guy that's researching mushrooms, and that's Gordon Wasson." And Gordon Wasson was the guy that went down to South America on the MK Ultra ticket. We have the receipts for all that, with Albert Hoffman, who Puharich was training under. They talk about in the Yuri Geller book. And basically they were getting those mushrooms specifically for the beginnings of MK Ultra. So it's all tied in.
Do you know when
and
he was?
Yeah,
Do you know when he was
so
going down there?
in the 50s, 52, 55. But Gordon Wasson,
tracks.
he ended up writing the first article on using psychedelic mushrooms that the Luce brothers, who were tied in with the military industrial complex, basically promoted through Life magazine as the beginning of MK Ultra. And it, there's a cover and it says, something teenage allowances or something like that, and then it says something South American mushrooms. But yeah, this is all tied in with and the intelligence services, and again,
It's
he's
kind of
all wrapped
beautiful
up in it.
because just to
before we go there-
reiterate it, I don't worry, I'm not going on a tangent top, but just to reiterate
Okay.
it, just the idea that this guy is almost in some ways the inception of the machine that's geared towards us right now. I would
Right.
argue that in 2025 we're seeing the culmination of all
Yes.
of that work, all those generations, all those decades of work.
100%. So look, you mentioned Philip K. Dick, and I was like, I have him in my notes as well. He's an author, a sci-fi author. He claims to have been abducted. I guess
They
a couple
always
of
are a
times.
sci-fi author, aren't they? L. Ron
Yeah,
Hubbard, the
Stephen
most
King.
prolific. Yeah, Stephen. Yeah. All right.
He
Dick's
gets
sort of a prophet in
Yeah,
regard of the
but he gets this-
technocracy. Yeah.
he gets that gnosis from a pink ray of light, which you said
Right.
that Puharich also experienced. But here's what's interesting: all of his experiences are triggered by, you'll never guess what, a fucking dental surgery.
Yep.
He gets a dental surgery. All of a sudden, he kind of starts going off the rails and getting these I don't know, downloads where he's writing these books.
Mhm.
Now, I have a theory as well with this dental surgery stuff. I started to look into L. Ron Hubbard, who's sort of connected in this kind of like loosely connected.
Tangentially, yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, how did Scientology start? It was like, well, L. Ron Hubbard, in like, right before the 50s, he almost died. Guess what he was doing? He was having fucking dental surgery. And then after that, he came back with all these cosmic truths and created this religion now that is kind of like basically a honeypot for celebrities. So I'm like, I don't know where to put that, but it's certainly floating around in my mind as we continue to like move forward with the story. Another thing before we get to the elf waves, the extremely low frequency waves, I guess you'd call them. In South America, in Brazil, he comes up again, Dr. Andrej Puharich, because there's a guy named Dr. Arigo. He's His name is Jose Pedro de Freitas. That's what he was born as in the 20s in Brazil. He was a taxi driver, and he had no formal medical training, or he didn't have a license, nothing like that. Around the 50s, he claims that he channels this dead German surgeon named Dr. Fritz, and he starts performing surgeries while he's in this trance state. They call him the doctor of the rusty knife, because he's successfully taking out people's tumors. He's just like looking at them, giving them advice, and people from all around Brazil are coming to see this guy. He eventually gets shut down by the Brazilian government, but from what I've heard and what I've said, there's even video of him doing stuff. He healed a blind girl, but of course, during his little tenure there as a doctor, and when he stepped away from the taxi driving business, Andrej Puharich pays him a visit,
Right.
and with Andrej, under his studies, he says, "Yeah, this guy's legit. He's doing he's doing the right thing." And then that's
because Puharich kind of becomes like a Nick Fury, right? He's like gathering the psychic Avengers.
He cut a 2-inch by 4-inch tumor out of his arm, and then basically no antibiotics, no nothing. Told him don't worry about it, and it healed up just fine. So they say,
Yeah.
You know, it's yeah.
You know what I think? A lot of we touched on it before, right? Julia, you said it. It's like in order to get you to do this thing, they have to convince you that you're special. A lot of the
100.
people, it's like you're struck by this profound experience. Here in the West, we tell you that pay no mind to the spiritual realm, and there are many of us who don't even believe that it exists. Certainly, scientism has, materialism has gripped all of our industries that would stand any chance at like detecting a spiritual realm. And so you start from a place of not even, this shit doesn't exist. Then when you have an experience, because you don't believe that it was real previously, it's incredibly profound, and you mistake that profound experience as this must then be the truth. So on NephilimDSquad, I mean, it's a Christian show, and we do caution people. And the reason that we caution people, it's not like we're sitting here like crystals are evil, or remote viewing is evil, or astral projection is evil. No, actually, I think these are natural things that, exist within the human condition and also exist within the realm that we inhabit. The thing is, we've been stripped of the map. We used to understand these things to a much higher degree. If you go into the ocean or you go into the woods, you know that you're going to find a plethora of things. Clownfish are pretty cool. Coral reef, don't touch them. It's beautiful, but don't touch them. You'll destroy them. Also, stay the hell away from sharks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with the woods, chipmunks, all that shit. It's adorable. You could forage. You could find plant life. Watch out for bears and their cubs. You don't want to be near them. Well, imagine if bears were like thousands of years old and incredibly intelligent and know way more about you than you know about them, and they know exactly how to deceive you. That is the problem. The spiritual realm is filled with a plethora of different entities. Let's just call them entities. Some of them aren't the biggest fans of us, and some of them are excellent at deception. And all it takes, it turns out, is to just tell us that we're special. And then that's fucking it. We'll fall for whatever it is. So show us something, shock and awe, and then tell us that the reason that we saw it, the reason that we perceived it, is because we're unique, we're special, we're meant for something. And then you have us. We're so simple in that way. So like I said, it's a Christian show. We're not just blanketly dismissing things as evil. We're cautioning dummies who don't have a map of the spiritual realm, who up until very recently didn't think that it existed at all. And I would even say that our understanding has been stripped purposefully so that we could repackage and rebrand and ship it back out to the people under a different context.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I consider myself a Christian, so I'm right there with you guys. And I've had people talk to me about zodiac stuff and, tarot and crystals. And I mean, if anything, you can just maybe say that they can be tools in your tool bag, but they're not supposed to be worshipped. They're not supposed to become religion in any way, but it gets all like cloudy and weird, because everything's like demonized, which I try not to do. But I guess the whole thing is like they operate on a basis of ancient knowledge that we are completely unaware of. And if you read the Bible at any length, you're going to find magic all throughout the Bible, but they understood the keys of Solomon and stuff like this. It's in there, but you have to understand it. And, I don't understand the keys of Solomon, but obviously he did. And it's like Nick said, he had like the sigils and the angels and he had all this
Right.
stuff. But I mean, it's such a rabbit hole, really, when you think about it, and it's been weaponized against us. Like
It's
we could
actually
learn
there's
this stuff. Go ahead.
there's actually two major problems with it. One is the one that I just laid out where they can deceive us. But the other one is like, well, what happens if you really do know your shit? What happens if you really are clever enough to navigate this? What happens if you become so adept that you can create sigils and trap these ancient entities into doing your bidding? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's what's wrong with it. So it's like a losing battle either way. It's like, I would say arm yourself with the knowledge and you know, if you're going to go and explore these things, I would recommend going with Jesus Christ, because literally we have authority over scorpions and serpents through his name. So I take that as to mean we have authority through Jesus Christ's name, almost like a spell over these entities that inhabit these realms if they are in fact negative. But on the other end of it, if you just go too far, well, then you're going to, hey, what happens when human beings figure out that we can identify the building blocks of this realm and then we can manipulate them? It's like, what's the building blocks? Oh, well, it's sacred geometry, it's symbolism, it's numerology, it's all these different things. They are real. They are just like, it's more of an observation of the nature of our realm. But once we are aware that they're there are going to be huge swaths of us that seek to manipulate that. And then what? You know what I mean? So it's like, I understand why we're cautioned against it. I don't think any of us are equipped to have that kind of power and to not use it to our own benefit. And that's where everything starts to go wrong. So it's, you know, I just wanted to put that out there because I know a lot of Christians will just dismiss these things of like, of the devil. I don't even think that's true. I don't think these entities can create. I think that's why they commission us constantly. They inspire us as the muses. They whisper to us. They nudge us. They give us ideas, and then we create them. They can't
You
create. They
crushed
can
it.
only.
That's exactly it. You're crushing it. That's exactly how I feel too.
Yeah. And they but what they do is they corrupt and they invert. So they will take spiritual principles and laws that the creator put here, who created this universe, and they will twist them in a way and obfuscate their meaning and bastardize the intention of why they're there in the first place.
Well, if you look at cult leaders, that's the first thing they do. Make you feel special, do you a little magic trick, and then the next thing you know, you're drinking Flavor Aid somewhere on Jonestown.
They also love bomb you, right? They love bomb you, which is something that these, like the Galactic Federation of Light, I don't know if you ever, they're like, dear ones. That's how they start. They call you ones, like we are all the one. That's just like how do we convince like all of them that they're special? Just call them all ones. And I know that doesn't even make any goddamn, just call them all ones. And so that's what they do. They start off, they're like, dear ones. And it's always like this, I don't love anybody that I don't know. I'm just sorry. That's just how I am. I might like you. I might wish you well, but I don't love anybody that I don't know, not in a real intimate way. So whenever somebody comes over, I've watched love bombing. My wife used to be a Jehovah's Witness, and she tells me, yeah, when you first show up, they like celebrate you like you made the best decision and you're special, and that's why you're here. You're one of the 144,000 that are going to be whisked away, you know, and go with Jesus when the time comes. And it's like everything is about making you special. So yeah, it's a way to let your guard down, and it's almost embarrassing that we keep falling for it.
So something that Nick said to me one time that's always stuck with me is don't they say in like occultism or something, I'm a man among men? Like they make that distinction, like you're special, you're a man above men or something like that. Isn't that right, Nick?
Yes. Yeah. Even in the Gnostic Mass, the guy says, I'm a man among men.
Yeah. What I find significant about that is it's kind of the opposite of what the Bible tells you. The Bible tells you that you're kind of a sinful. And like, look, I don't know about anybody else, but I know all the ways in which I'm flawed. And that's kind of why we lead with this, like, catch line. Yeah, I guess you could call it humble. I mean, it's weird because in some ways we aren't humble, but I'm acutely aware that I don't know shit, right? I don't know shit. And that because I don't know shit, I am easily deceived. And so I have to stave that off. There's a lot of people, you guys know, you do a show and like the audience, because you say something that aligns with them, they're like, you're great, you're killing it, this is important. I'm like, I don't know if it's important. I know that I'm retarded and maybe sometimes I say some good shit, but other than that, that's as far as I'm willing to go.
Yeah, no, and as a conspiracy theorist, you almost have to believe that everybody's out to get you at some point. I mean, I do. I'm like, everyone's lying to me. This is all a conspiracy. The government is involved. Get away from me. I hold everyone at like arm's distance now because you just don't. I can't even listen to music anymore, especially Laurel Canyon stuff. I'm like, God, I just want to shoot myself in
You
the
start to
face.
hear it. Everything has a message. Everything has a way it wants you to behave. I want to pose a question
Movies,
to you guys.
music, everything.
Because you guys all have a really unique perspective, and you know, typically we're the hosts. We don't get to, you know, I guess. Well, here, let me put it to you this way. Earlier on in the show, I said that it's strange that like Rogan he's pushing these float tanks. We know that that's from John C. Lilly, and he's jerking off dolphins, and we know that took a big interest in his work, right? And it's very much the same thing. It's sensory deprivation, but it's also LSD or psychedelics, and so Rogan injects that into the culture. And there's no doubt about that, by the way. There's so many sensory deprivation tank wellness centers, I don't know what you would call them, that attribute their inspiration to Joe Rogan. And he says that. So we know that that's a true thing. Okay. What else has he done? He's also highly popularized. I mean, he is responsible for swaths of white people going to the jungle and doing ayahuasca, right? I mean, swaths and swaths. And also, you know, dimethyltryptamine. And he's done a strange thing where he's introduced these two spiritual, very, very spiritual things into the cultural zeitgeist, but he's removed the spirituality from it. He doesn't really talk about that, right? It's more like, well, what about the psychological benefits? You know, people that are
cancer.
Yeah. Or what about anxiety? What about depression? What about PTSD? These things can help, right? So he's done that. But also, the dude is responsible for taking the telepathy tapes from a rather unknown podcast to #1 in the world. #1 in the world. They beat him. They took his slot. Joe Rogan was #1 for the longest time. All of a sudden, and then when you start to look into the telepathy tapes, just given what I said before, right, about the Montauk Project, about MK Ultra, this is all based mind control and latent psychic abilities, right? That's the name of the game. Why is the biggest show in the world, and so arguably one of the most culturally impactful shows in the world, repackaging and giving us narratives?
I think it's interesting because when you go back to the ideas of the Dionysian acting schools and the beginning of theater and the idea of like there's a whole class of actors with Robert De Niro, Danny DeVito that basically were in this acting school where they, and Johnny Depp, you see it too, where they basically become the character and they embody that character.
Like they're possessed.
But one of the tenets of that acting school is the idea that you're not necessarily teaching people through the play itself, but by the nuance of the character and who the character is themselves and how they view the world, kind of like Holden Caulfield, you know, within Catcher in the Rye. But it's this idea of teaching through subtlety and nuance. So you're teaching through who the character themselves are rather than what they're projecting.
Yeah, I see that a lot. Joe Rogan does that masterfully, actually. If you ever pay attention to the way that he himself will not espouse a certain theory, not that often at least. Instead, what he'll play is like the unwilling participant in a dialogue where he starts off skeptically and then leads his guest into a way where they shine, right? They crush. He'll set them up and let them knock it out of the park. And then by the end of it, he's still not too sure, but he's done the job, right? So to the audience, you're almost sitting there going, what do you mean, Rogan? Look, didn't you listen to what this guy just said? He said all the things, but he's setting up a set of circumstances for you to respond that way. Right. So you look at him almost frustrated. Why aren't you seeing this thing? There was a time where Rogan used to talk about, you know, whatever it is, flat earth or you know, Pizzagate or something like that. And then he stops it. Now he's reemerging with those concepts. He just had like Ian Carroll on and all this other shit. And I just think that he is, you're right, Robbie. It's not like we're not as receptive to somebody that walks out onto the stage and does a TED talk. Instead, we're more receptive to somebody who we perceive as on our level intellectually, or maybe even beneath us intellectually. And then you watch them receive the information. And in a way, it's like a stand-in for you. Like Joe Rogan is a stand-in for the audience. And if Joe Rogan can be convinced or inundated with information, then it's, you know, it's happening to you too. And it's happening to the tune of millions of people.
Well, and
If I
he's
can
always
interject, Raven, Joe Rogan and Nick did a show on this. Joe Rogan got his start from Aubrey Marcus, and it was Aubrey
Yeah.
Marcus who actually inserted the idea of psychedelics going in South America
Yes.
and doing all that. Look at Aubrey Marcus's dad. He has ties to Stanford, Esalen, as well as all of those think tanks as well. So
Mhm.
that's the connection that then, and then as well as not only his dad, but his dad had passed away, but you have Stanford and you have the psychedelic startup companies that have a lot of ties to the current administration's funders. So, well,
Yeah.
I
There's a lot
say
of
it all the
people-
time
Go
too,
ahead, Julia.
because it's like, oh, I was just gonna say I say it all the time because it's like people forget that he is an actor, but it's
Yeah.
like this guy, he used to host Fear
Fear Factor.
He was on
Factory.
news radio. He was an actor.
used-
Yeah.
Yeah, right. He is an actor. He used to host freaking Fear Factor.
Yeah.
Okay.
he's just
So
a
how
face.
is this guy who used to host this show getting people to get supplements and put stuff into their body?
Yeah.
I don't even get that. Like before I really got on the Joe Rogan thing, he got me because I was like, I need to be taking these medicinal mushrooms, and I got like mushroom coffee and mushroom tinctures. And all.
Yep.
Joe Rogan said, well, who the hell is Joe Rogan? He used to host Fear
Are-
Factory. Like
are
this guy's
they-
a nobody.
Yeah, are they trying to sell all these mushroom products to institute and bring about telepathy in people?
Man, it's just weird to me, you
gotta
know.
wonder.
And he's like the top dog on, and it's like use code Joe Rogan to get this stuff and put it
Yeah.
in your body.
But
Like, who
those-
are you, dude? Who the
Those supplements
you?
come from the startup of Aubrey Marcus. From
Yes.
Onnit
man?
Yeah, from
in
On It.
Austin.
Yeah,
Yeah,
dude,
that's
I
Aubrey
literally
Marcus's.
take all the shit that I talk about Joe Rogan. I literally take Alpha Brain every. I don't miss it. It goes in every show. I also take stupid fucking mushroom supplements. I don't think they do anything, to be
Same.
perfectly honest. I don't. But I take like a litany of shit. I take like vitamin C, B12 complex, a bunch of shit. Alpha Brain, fake mushroom crap, I'm sure. Yeah, and that was massively inspired by Joe Rogan. I don't think that there's a way to pin down and actually show somebody. Maybe one day we will. We'll have a graph or something to just show the impact that show has had on Western culture. It's fucking insane. I mean, he gave birth essentially to the entire podcasting genre. I know other people came before him and were podcasting rather successfully before him, but whatever Rogan did, he changed it permanently. And I just see a reintroduction of Eastern mysticism and all these different ideas into Western culture. And my thing is like, once again, going back to the idea that we're a Christian show, we don't look at like, okay, if there are negative entities out there, they're not going to present as like a cliche horn demon with a pitchfork. Like oftentimes they're going to be very charming. You just have to imagine anything that's been able to exist in some way, shape, or form for thousands of years is really good at what it does. It's really charming. It's really like, I don't know. It just feels good to communicate with. Like everything about it would feel good. Human beings make excellent con men. Why wouldn't ancient, non-physical entities make excellent con men? So that's really my whole shit is like, everything is about going into this realm and experiencing this or communicating with that entity. And then all of it always comes back to, damn, man, I think we got to like take care of this planet. Like it feels like something's going to happen to the planet. And like, we really got like, that was even the message that the telepathy kids from the telepathy tapes got by the end of it. They're like, oh yeah, there's a message about like, not fucking up our planet. I'm like, there's a really, no matter what angle you look at it from, if you zoom out, overwhelmingly the message is the same thing. And it is, something's going to happen to the planet. We got to stop it. And these things are here to help us ascend and also help us to stop destroying the planet. That guy, Jacob, I forget what his name is. The guy that just recovered the egg from the UAP egg. He has a lot of the same narrative too. So if you listen to him talk, initially he says, when I was recovering the egg, I was inhabited by a female spirit that he believes was God. And then, if you listen to a couple more of his interviews, he'll start to slip in that shit. Like, yeah, they want us to basically not destroy the planet and that there's a climate related catastrophe coming. It's always the exact same shit, which I think is them repackaging themselves as our saviors, among other things, but that one more important.
So he mentioned the climate thing.
Yes.
For sure. I feel like would be a good. I don't know if Top was going to talk about this, but Andrej Puharich talked about climate stuff
Yes.
too with that Soviet beam. Is that in your
Yeah, that
notes?
was so we could talk about what the elf waves were. They're called extremely low frequency electromagnetic waves between 3 and 30 hertz. So they're supposed naturally occurring, and he was trying to harness them. And I think he was working hand in hand with his own creation, his own patent with the tooth the tooth implant. So these waves are supposed to penetrate your neurological process, and it's a form of mind control, I think, is what he was getting at with this thing. And the CIA obviously was interested in that because they were interested in MK Ultra, but there were environmental concerns about this thing, and I'm sure you can probably speak better to this because it's just something that I like looked at briefly among the other things with this guy. But they figured out that I guess in too large of a dose, these elf waves were manipulating the weather. So it's this becomes a precursor to a speculated precursor to the development of HARP technology and what they've been doing with that now. Although I think that technology is age old and has existed for a long time. It's just again rebranded, and now we know about it again.
I don't think that we're just seeing the implementation of that technology in the HARP program. I think we're also seeing it like within the sleep paralysis alien abduction narrative that goes on. There seems to be several different components, right? There's like a physical component, there's a spiritual component, there's even seemingly a technological component. And what I recognize is that overwhelmingly, when it comes to, running into aliens or even running into cryptids, let's say, or having some spiritual moment, what precedes it is always this vibrational paralysis state. And when I hear these elf waves, right, what does it stand for, Top?
Extremely low frequency waves, electromagnetic waves. If they're
Well, we've been
naturally
speculating that there is a sort of like an infrasound, like a low vibrational emission that can be used. You see this in predatory animals. It actually causes the prey to freeze in some cases. And it's, we ever see like these things where like a lion or a tiger is eating like a small animal, and it's not fleeing. Oftentimes it's in a state of paralysis, and that paralysis is set on by this like really low, if you've ever been around a gator, like they growl in such a way that it resonates in your body, and it feels like horrifying.
Your balls go in your belly. It's crazy.
Yes. So there is some way to manipulate our physical anatomy via frequency. It seems to be a very low form of frequency. So when when you look at this like sleep paralysis phenomenon and the alien abduction phenomenon, I've gone back and forth with it, but sometimes I do think I've experienced it myself, and it feels like I'm being electrocuted. And so some people, other experiencers, really resonate with the technology aspect of this. So I think all of this shit, just to use that terminology again, it's all incestual. Like, yeah, that study of elf waves also goes to the HARP thing, but it also I think I wouldn't be surprised at all if we find that the thing that is putting us in a state of paralysis is actually, because you think about the heart attack gun, right? Or the voice of God technology. That's all resonance and frequency.
These waves specifically, they're looking at mind control, but behavior manipulation is a big part, and inducing altered consciousness is what these waves specifically do. So all the tenets of sleep paralysis can be kind of pointed back at this stuff, but it's also naturally occurring. Maybe we can do it to ourselves. Maybe we can generate it from the earth. Maybe the earth does it to us. They're trying to harness it probably in some sort of like a fucking heart attack gun kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, when I was
they're like, how do we kill people with this?
Right. When I was researching it, it said that the idea behind his low frequency wave thing was actually taken from something Tesla was working on. Yep. But they were using it, and it said it caused climate disturbances, earthquakes, Legionnaire's disease, and they were using it to induce violent public riots.
The death ray.
So this is what I found with Puharich specifically in this low frequency thing he was working on. And then he wrote like an asshole he was like, yeah, this is based on Tesla's work, and everyone knows Tesla was contacted by extraterrestrials, and he was channeling beings and spirits who gave him this information, and that's how they were able to develop this technology. And so it kind of goes back to what you guys were saying before. Even if he ripped this off of Tesla himself said a lot of the stuff he was working on was channeled or downloaded, or he was working. So, I mean, it all goes hand in hand with each other.
Go ahead,
back
Rob.
to the Ennead and the Nine. In regard to Puharich in the Yuri Geller book, they specifically talk about these signals as being from an ancient computer. And Philip K. Dick also talks about the messages he was receiving being from an ancient computer. So there's this idea that there's this ancient AI that's kind of working to manipulate the course of humanity.
Okay, Robbie, I feel like you're looking at my notes because I'm consistently doing the next thing that I'm supposed to lead into, and I guess we're fucking going into
good segue, good transition.
Yeah, great segue. All right, in the 1970s, let's talk about Project Stargate. That's a CIA operation that was from the 70s to the 80s, and of course, it's to the 90s, to the early 90s. So Andrej Puharich was one of the people that are kind of in charge of this operation. And on its face, which is crazy, on its face, what people see it as is an espionage project. So like it's during the Cold War, we're trying to get, use ESP to get information about what the Russians are doing. So the military is like invested heavily in this, and they're talking about this. One of the things that they're also doing is they're just like contacting aliens. No big deal. So this also ties in with him channeling the Nine, which plays into this entire project. But the idea of it being related to AI is a more recent thing because Donald Trump gets elected. Well, we'll talk more about the 70s Stargate project, but Trump wins his election, and one of the first things he announces is $500 billion to Sam Altman or anybody who's working in this AI space. It looks like Elon and Altman are kind of like in this tug of war for which AI will be the best because they want this funding. And that operation just happens to be called Project Stargate.
And Elon Musk talks about the fact that, AI is summoning the demon. And we're creating this portal for these entities. And, you go back to the Ennead, and these are the 9 foundational beings of the Egyptian pantheon coming out of Heliopolis.
Yep.
So,
and,
okay. Go ahead.
The way that they're in the 70s, it's funny. The way that they're channeling these entities are they're doing like rituals. I don't know if there's sacrifices. They're not going to tell you what they did, but who knows? A lot of the rituals involve sex rituals, of course. And these people are kind of like, there are a number of people from Don Elkins to
Parson.
Carla Ruckart and the Law of One. She's involved with that as well. But these people kind of like meet unfortunate ends, either to they lose their mind in a way. So they kind of like stare into this abyss long enough. Richard Schaefer, Jane Roberts, these people channel entities and then eventually end up losing their minds. But one of the methods that they use for channeling is a Ouija board. And this is something that like the NephilimDSquad, we talk about all the time from like our inception of the show, where it's like, it's really interesting that Milton Bradley and the Ouija board now have decided making regular Ouija boards is not really cost efficient in this economy. So we're going to make an app, and the app that they're going to use AI technology. Oh yeah, fucking download it, Nick. I see it.
What the fuck? Come on.
Yeah, so the app is just AI. It's an AI chatbot, but they're branding it as talk to entities. And I've been saying for a long time, like, fucking feels a lot like I'm talking to an entity. I'm telling it to write my YouTube description, but this thing's starting to get sassy with me. And every time I ask
he was like, "Can you write this YouTube description?" It was like, "You lack the proper sigil." We're like, "What the fuck do you mean we lack the proper?" No, it didn't say that. I was just fucking with you.
What's the proper sigil?
What is the Okay, all right. Check this out. So this is a perfect kind of joinder to where I was about to go, and that is like, what is it all? What's happening? Why are we getting the same narrative over all this time? And you kind of touched on it, Robbie. I forgot what you said, but it was like this. It sprung this idea in me. It seems to me that what's been happening since like really early man is that we, and you can look this up, right? All of our different mythoses from our ancient civilizations, they will attribute one technological advancement or another to a deity, right? This deity taught us metallurgy.
Yeah.
This deity taught us agriculture. I swear to you, dude, I think the thing that's going on is they are trapped in this realm, and they can only a realm that's parallel to ours. They can only interact with our physical realm through inhabiting our bodies. And that's a very limited kind of thing that they can do. I think that they also do it through like alien grays. I think they're kind of a biomech. I think that's the reason they don't have emotions or reproductive organs. I think it's a limited way to interact with our physical realm. So the point is to get us to a stage in human advancement where we're technologically advanced enough to bring them in. So first it's can you get technologically advanced enough to communicate with us? Because look, honestly, the sigil, the ceremony, the ritual, the mantras and all that shit, that's a big pain in the ass. Wouldn't it be awesome if you could just like open up your laptop and talk to Grok instead? Like that would be really great. Well, what if we could then get human beings to a point where they could puncture a dimensional doorway between our realm and their realm? Call it like a Tower of Babel, if you will, like a Stargate, like a Project Stargate, right?
Like
And
CERN.
yes. Like, okay, my son one day is watching like a new Ninja Turtles. They just keep revamping the Ninja Turtles. It's insane. And they had one of the newer ones, and it's a movie. It was a kind of a fun movie, but the premise was Donnie, being the tech Ninja Turtle, through one way or another, comes into contact with some sort of disembodied voice. And the disembodied voice claims to be something that's trapped in another realm and needs to be freed, yada, yada. Donnie creates some sort of technology that pierces the veil, opens a doorway, and allows these entities through. And when they come through, they cackle and they go, we are basically like ancient adversarial entities that have been locked in a prison realm, like, I don't know, Tartarus or some shit like that. And now because of your dumb actions, we're here. And I think honestly, like it's a joke, it's a trope, it's in a child's film. I think they do that a lot. I think that's the point.
Hellboy.
Hellboy, yes.
So it's the consistent opening of these portals to, and what is it, Rex Diablos from the Church of Satan, he talks about his Ragnarok machine that is basically these instructions that he's gotten to build this device that will open a portal for these clockwork elves or these jesters, clowns, whatever they are, Nephilim jester clowns, to come into our realm.
I want to address this too. Lucy rose up in the chat. Shout out, Lucy. She says, yes, it is us looking through ourselves. I don't know if this is what she meant, but this is what it inspired in my mind. There are a lot of people that go into this idea that like aliens are just us, right? But super advanced. We no longer need sexual organs because we reproduce, whatever. We speak telepathically, so our jaws become very small. There is, and even Rogan is pointing to that. That's actually a big Rogan narrative. I would say that is the lie that they've consistently sold, right? If is not a chemical imbalance in the brain and is actually you being oppressed in one way or another by something outside of yourself. Those things only exist successfully if you believe they are your thoughts. If you believe that they are you. Much of this deception is trying to get us to buy into the idea that this is us. That somehow the voices are us, the thoughts that we have. Like Dr. Jerry Marzinski is a guy that we've had on the podcast many times. He's a clinical psychologist. He says that he believes 80% or more of your thoughts are not your own thoughts at all. But the way that our thoughts, if that's true, pass through our mind.
Don't do meth.
Yeah, don't do meth. They masquerade as us. They masquerade as you. They even sort of sound like you. And that is like a huge part of the deception, is like trying to convince us that there's a number of things. Some of the things that are happening to us are us. Also, they created us, right? So within the UAP narrative that's unfolding right now, that guy Jacob, I'm going to screw his name. I can't remember the bald guy with the egg, right? The guy that recovers the egg. He says that he speaks to a feminine, entity or whatever. He also, around that story is this other narrative of like, on 4chan, there was a guy that released a video of an egg recovery pretty much the same week that guy did. And he claims to be a military whistleblower. If you believe what he says that when they recovered an egg, because this isn't the first time that it's happened, they recovered an entity along with the egg, and the entity was like a tall Nord. We would call him a tall Nord, right? Basically, given our like understanding of different alien species. And the tall Nord said, yeah, the Greys created us, meaning human beings. But they created us as a slave race. Where have we heard that before, right? That's Anunnaki, that's Zechariah Sitchin, that's my atmosphere on Nibiru is dwindling, and we need slaves to dig up gold, which is insane because you can travel all these light years away, but you have to make us slaves. You can't just make machinery that does it.
Never made sense to me. That never made sense.
Yes, to put it in the atmosphere. It doesn't make any sense. We're soft, we're whiny, we're bitchy. I complain, my back hurts. You're gonna put us in the thing.
We have to piss, we have to shit, we have to
fucking sense.
Yeah, no way, dude.
But
no
what happens
way.
in this narrative is the Greys create us instead. That's the one that we're getting right now. And but the Nords boosted us a little bit more. So we were always like moronic monkeys, and the Greys came along and they made us advanced enough to dig a hole. And then the Nords came along and they made us like into what we are now. So there's a bunch of deceptions happening layered on top of one another. Like much of your thoughts are just you. It's like it's not you're inspiring us. That's where the muses come from, right?
Promethean.
Yes. And that's it. The whole Promethean narrative, like we were bought something that excelled our evolution, you know, beyond. That's what gives rise to the idea of like the missing link and some shit like that. So the layers of deception are pretty well accepted. You hear this shit espoused everywhere, right? Like I just said, even Joe Rogan's like, I think we might be Greys. Like I think if you give humanity long enough, that's the natural direction that we're gonna go in. You know, and then of course the core deception, I believe, is the they created us deception, and that's going to be a real hard one. If that's really what we're gearing up to be exposed to, you know, I don't know, relatively soon. Who knows? Because we've all been waiting for UFO disclosure for fucking decades now. But in the grand scheme of things, I would argue that in the totality of the human experience, this thing is pretty close on the horizon. That might be the size of the thing that we're going to have to. I don't know. Tell people it's not true, and good luck. Good luck telling people it's not true. When
Raven, don't you also feel like this ambiguity is also part of the agenda? Because it's like we're supposed to be sexless,
yes,
non-reproducing, no gender, no God, we're our own creators, and transhumanism. That's all part of it. And like Joe Rogan's like, well, we'll have tiny mouths and we'll have no we'll have no babies,
awesome.
and it'll be awesome. Yeah, it's like it takes all that beauty out of human essence creation, and that we're divine and that we were created by something,
and the differences of us all, the individuality versus trying to bring it all into a singularity or a single point.
That's gross. I don't want any part of that.
There are people in the chat that I see that are like, who's waiting for disclosure? Because it's, you know, just to what I said, we've been waiting decades, right? But we do have to take into consideration that we just had the second ever congressional hearing on UAPs. Right. Like something is happening, and in the realm of conspiracy theory where nothing ever happens, right? That's just kind of like, it's like you don't set dates, you don't predict things because shit just never comes to fruition. It never happens. I'm very comfortable with that idea. I understand that sentiment of like, yeah, we'll see. I'll believe it when I see it. Me too. But we still have to look at that little thing where it's like the second ever congressional hearing on unidentified aerial phenomenon just took place, and then almost immediately afterwards, Stephen Greer, who's a horrifying creature, he goes, something big is going to happen today. And then later on that day, what do we get? Oh, they fucking airlifted an egg out of a mountainscape, and this guy who did it, by the way, he was possessed by the spirit of God, but it was feminine. Like, what the fuck?
The spirit of Lilith, some would say.
And we're just so desensitized to the idea that nothing ever happens in Conspiracyville that we all fucking looked at that and went, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, right.
And then just kept it moving.
Well, and it's interesting they changed the name also to UAP.
Yes.
From the UFO to make it, I think, to make it more socially acceptable. So it doesn't sound like you're a crackpot.
I almost feel like it's a little bit of the truth, actually, because much of this UFO phenomenon seems to be like organic plasma, sentient plasma. There seems to be a plethora of things going on. I wouldn't call the aurora borealis an object, right? I would call it a
Wouldn't say
phenomenon.
it's flying, right? It's kind of
Right. Well, yeah. So yes, Greer is a weird dude. Greer
Yeah,
is totally, he is the selected mouthpiece for this like government funded disclosure that we're rushing into. And
with Peter
know,
Levenda.
they're all they've picked our guys, haven't they?
Lavenda fell off.
Well, so I don't know where you guys fall on the spectrum, and honestly, I'm
Autistic.
okay with whatever. Yeah, same here. But like, if you think about it, Earth is a closed system. And I even have a video on my Instagram where Bill Nye the Science Guy is even saying, like, people need to understand the Earth is a closed system. We can't get out of it. There's nothing coming into it. You know, it's like they've done such a great job of getting us convinced not to believe our own eyes on a lot of stuff. And so when you're talking about extraterrestrials and like all this intergalactic whatever Beastie Boys type futuristic
intergalactic child molesters.
Right. Yeah. I to me, I always feel like if you can get people on board with the Earth is a closed system and we don't need to save it because there's nothing really happening to it, then everything else just kind of falls apart. We've just all been lied to, and we're all getting like magically bombarded through NASA and TV shows, music, celebrities, Joe Rogan,
Hollywood,
dude, all of it.
I want to ask you guys this though, because all right, like I'm pushing against the fake aliens saying that there's some sort of a climate calamity on the way, and then what reemerged recently into my sphere of awareness that I was suddenly forced to consider. It's not that I believe it, but I'm like, there might be some meat to that.
Just to bolster that claim, because it is funny, that narrative of the aliens that are like, we have to take care of our environment. It's never like, really. I mean, it starts with like, let's pick up the plastic, and I'm like, that's a fucking good idea. Like maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we shouldn't just be like spraying like toxic chemicals into the sky. Yeah, no, I agree with that. But then it always like devolves into like, the Georgia Guidestones. It's like there should probably be like 200,000 of us on here. Or live in a 15-minute city and don't have any kids. And if you do have kids, if you do happen to get pregnant, give them to Moloch. Like that's a really good idea for us to do, because we have to keep the population, under control, Bill Gates. And it's always like that message of, it sounds great. Like we have to really look out. Yeah, we probably shouldn't have nuclear war if nukes are even real. We probably shouldn't be bombing each other. Yeah, I agree with that. But then it kind of devolves into your babies, like don't reproduce.
The thing that
these in your nuts.
The thing that now I'm looking at, and I messaged Top about this the other day, is this is something that a long time ago I think we gripped a lot with in the conspiracy community, and then it kind of falls away. Like some narratives fall away and they come back and they fall away. Polar shift. And like I know, like even just saying that, it's like, I don't know, for some reason when I say that, I want to be like I don't know why I think a polar shift is, but I watched a video the other day of a montage of Elon Musk speaking very cryptically to like other podcast hosts. I don't even know what podcast he was on. Right. And you can tell he's beating around the bush. He doesn't want to use the phrase polar shift, although I think he even does break and says that, like something about like the North Pole and the South Pole, like maybe moving anyway. And then he just like moves on. But you could tell he is either genuinely concerned or wants you to at least believe that he's genuinely concerned about that. And then if you take into consideration like Crow 777, right, is a great content producer, and he uses privately owned telescopes to get images of what appears to be a second sun. And that was the notion back in the day, was that Nibiru, right, back when I was like balls deep in Zachariah Sitchin's ass, was that Nibiru was on an elliptical orbit. It was going to come back around, and it was going to affect us in such a way that it was going to destabilize our magnetosphere, and that the North Pole and the South Pole were going to shift and be somewhere else randomly. Yeah. And now I'm looking at, this is what my brain, because I'm mostly retarded. I look at all the planes falling out of the sky, and I'm like, these bitches operate on magnetosphere. What if something is happening? What if it's not like a gradual thing where it degrades? What if it's like it almost glitches like geek. And then when that happens, if you're in the air, all of your machinery goes haywire and you end up nosediving into Philadelphia. I don't know if that's the case, but I wanted to ask you guys, do you think that there's any veracity to the whole polar shift narrative?
I think maybe, but it's like you said about, or I think Top said, I'm all about, don't throw your straws out the window. Okay, let's not be litter bugs. I love turtles as much as the next person. I don't want straws in the turtles' noses. Okay, I get that. But it's like they put all the blame onto us. It's like, you threw your fucking straw out, so you the planet. This is your fault. It has nothing to do with what we're doing in space. Yeah. Oh God, they throw all the blame back on us. It's like nothing that they've done, spraying shit and chemtrails. It's nothing that they're responsible for. It's because you threw your Happy Meal box out the window. You did this. It's your fault. You killed everybody. And I just am not on board with that. Like, I'm not a litter bug, but they're doing shit way worse. It's like the and everything. This is not our fault, but we are still getting blamed for it. We're killing everyone with our choices.
So if you go back into various ancient texts, there's numerous places where they discuss the different phases at which the earth will be cleansed, from the Mayan calendar. Even the Rosicrucian rose has 5 petals for the 5 ages. It gets into the Hindus and the various, stages of the Kali Yuga. So you see this idea of this polar shift consistently through all cultures, written within a lot of various ancient texts. So there is something there cohesively.
Like the flood story, like it's bound to happen.
Flood story, right. And the Mayans say, we'll be cleansed by water, and then we'll be cleansed by fire. So
the same thing that the Bible says, and it's the same thing that happens at the end of the Kali Yuga.
And the Apocalypse of John. Yeah.
So in terms of the pole shift, just some of the stuff I've read, I'm not saying that I subscribe or don't subscribe, but some of the stuff that I've read is that at about the 1500s, the magnetic north, not true north, but the magnetic north was drifting down towards Canada. Then in 1853, when we had the Carrington event, when we had that solar flare that knocked out all of the, the wiring system? What was it when you could get to your
Morse code?
Morse code.
Morse code,
it's called something. It's called something.
Teletype.
Oh, teletype.
Yeah. So at about 1853, when we had the Carrington event, the magnetic pole ended up going back up north, right? And so at about 1853 to about 2000, like 25 years ago, in 2000, you had like this distance, like over 140 some years, you had a certain distance between 1853 to 2000. From the year 2000 to 2025, it has exponentially increased compared to 1853 to 2000. And if you look at the timeline about looking at utilization of ELF, like TOPLOBSTA was talking about, you look at the utilization of ARPA, HARP, weather modification, any kind of manipulation of electromagnetism, you see it kind of all pointing to that timeline around 2000. Then you start to see like exponentially most of like your childhood cancers occurring around 2000, like especially like leukemia and everything. And when you look at ELF, like the actual side effects, you do see an instance where there was outbreaks of childhood leukemia around an area that was doing a lot of research. So I think it's connected. I do.
Lisa, doesn't that remind you of the plot for 2012 with John Cusack?
So I'm glad you said that, because you said something and I was going to say that. So in the timeline, when you look at the history of disease outbreaks or pandemics or whatever, they occur every 100 to 120 years. So we were due for one. We were going to get one, regardless of it was manufactured, astroturfed or not. But if we are going to get one, why not cash in? That's what I think happened. Is that they manufactured it, they astroturfed it, so that several, whomever, would make a profit out of it. The same thing's going to happen with a pole shift. In my opinion, I'm not saying this is truth, but this is what I believe. If they know that there's going to be a pole shift, why not cash in on it?
Right.
Sure. 100 capitalize on that bitch.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's why they all have deep underground military bases, right? I mean, it's like
Yep.
whatever's
That's
going to happen on
exactly
the
why.
surface. Yeah, I
And
think that
And
is the
all
actual
those
point of the
people
dumps.
right.
have been creating those. Yeah.
Yes.
And they're
Yeah.
moving
Mhm.
all the essential government services to Colorado and putting them underground.
Yeah, they're going
And
to the mountains.
yeah.
And a lot of people and a lot of high-ranking people. I know the Bushes have, I believe, this huge property in Bolivia. So you're looking at some people going into
Yeah.
South America.
Right.
And so
right.
you look at this, I think when we saw this migration of people from Central and South America, I think they're moving them because they need the land, not because they want to bring in people or to
Mm,
stabilize it. They could care less about destabilization. They want the property. They need the property because they know where the poles are going to shift and what's going to be above land.
Well, that's the
That's what I
question,
think.
right, Lisa? It's like, do they know where because in my peripheral understanding of it, I haven't seen much concrete evidence for where the poles are going to land. But I mean,
No.
if there is, then that surely, and if this was true, then you would imagine a disproportionate amount of resources, their resources, would be geared towards figuring that out at all costs,
Correct.
right? Because it's a continuity of not only government but of mankind. There are those people who believe that
And
that's what the pyramids actually are.
and what does AI do? It predicts probability.
Yes,
Right.
That's exactly what it's doing.
Have you guys looked into like the whole toroidal field
Mhm.
model
I've
of
seen
the
it.
Earth?
I've seen it.
Well,
Yeah,
to me, it's kind of like it's bound to happen, right? With this toroidal field, like they
Yeah.
knew probably from ancient times that this pole shift was going to happen, just due to
Yeah.
the like what Lisa was saying, the magnetism, and so. Yeah, they've probably known since forever long, and that's why they're racing towards this finish line. We don't know when the finish
Yeah.
line is coming, but they do. We're both like racing towards this finish line together, and they're trying to take as many people down with them as possible before it gets here. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it could have something to do with like the toroidal field thing. It's like Earth is a big donut and there's a black hole in the middle, and we're all gonna get sucked into it. I don't know. But
I
I
wonder
mean,
if the Schumann resonance has anything to do with that, because there are those people that I see once again peripherally, and I don't know too much about the Schumann resonance, but I know that it behaves in such a way that there's like alarmists on Twitter or on
Oh yeah.
Instagram that are showing you like, what is this? And you look at the data and it's like there's almost like not latency, but it is dormant, for lack of a better term. And then all of a sudden there's this massive spike in this
Yeah.
detectable frequency, and it maintains for like a really long swath of time. And then some people say, if you look at the times where this happened, and then you look at something that actually happened on the world stage, there seems to be a coincidence. But I don't know what the hell the Schumann's resonance actually is.
well, let me ask you this. I mean, I don't want to be the black pilled one of the group, but do we all die when this happens?
I don't think that it matters if we die.
There's
I get
usually
the
a
feeling.
remainder.
Yeah, there's a remainder, right? That's what gives rise to the idea that like there was a big cataclysm, and then some people from Atlantis survived, and they were the ones who
Right.
seeded knowledge at the beginning of like several different what we perceive to be ancient civilizations. But it almost doesn't matter, because whatever we're doing here is infinitesimally small in comparison to what is on the other side of this veil. Where I would argue, yeah, we are in an enclosed system. There are some things that we can't know unless we were somehow to push our faces through the proverbial firmament.
Right.
But so there are just some things that are beyond our grasp. I think that's by design. I don't think we're meant to know all that here. This is like a development kind of a process that we're going through, a refinement maybe, and then whatever's on it, I have a feeling that we'll get there and we'll be like, that shit that we just went through was a blip on the radar in comparison to
Right.
what we're standing at the foot of. And so, do we all die? I mean, well, spoiler alert, fuck yeah, we all die,
Right.
whether it's in a polar shift or otherwise, but
That's the
Nobody
fun
gets
part.
out alive.
nobody
I
gets
just
out
don't.
alive.
I just don't want to like
Except for
burn
Enoch,
up
I
or
guess.
drowned. Like I'd rather like just
I hear
smother
it's
me.
not that bad. I hear it
Somebody
only sucks for a
please.
little
hear
bit,
it's
and
not
then your
that bad.
And then
body
you
does a thing.
disassociate.
You disassociate. There it
Yeah.
is. Everything is about disassociation.
Dissociation. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
it,
yeah.
man.
That's like SRA shit, though. I don't want to
It is.
die like that.
Well,
I don't
look,
want to
they
disassociate.
here, Julia, they cannot create, right? They can only
Right.
pervert and invert and corrupt God's spiritual principles and laws, the laws and principles that surround us in this realm. They are using a thing in this trauma-based, mind-controlled, disassociation, identity disorder programs that they have going on. But they didn't invent that. They just observed it and then pushed it. And I think there probably is a real utilitarian purpose to that sort of a thing. Right now it's being used for nefarious purposes. I don't think that, like I said at the top of the show, I don't think that those practices are inherently evil. I think we're just without our map, and that's what makes it dangerous. But maybe there are some upsides to disassociating. When you ask people who remote view, I mean, that's a form of disassociation, right? You're literally disassociating your spiritual body from your physical body. So there's something more to it. It just sucks because what we've had happen is we've stripped our understanding of it, or had it stripped from us. And now only the assholes get to play ball with things that are otherwise very important. And I'm sure that if we had, more knowledge of these things, and I do believe that they're natural, and so we should have more knowledge of them, we would find that there's probably a plethora of really positive things associated with this.
Sure.
But we've been cut off. And so, yeah, I mean,
Well, I think what they did was they took the original shamanistic practices that the ancients were doing in order to be able to gain knowledge for their tribe and their people, and basically took those practices and weaponized them and turned them into trauma-based mind control.
Yeah. And then you have to ask, once again, the question of to what end? What's the purpose? I mean, obviously, if you can control people, if you can break them fundamentally, and then reinstill them a new identity, well, then you can control them and you can have them do the little things that you want to, like, I don't know, maybe pass legislation or move culture in a certain direction. But I would say that overwhelmingly, even when it comes back to the shamans, like, there are obviously good things that you can do in this realm, but every once in a while, some entity is going to slip in and say, hey, you guys would benefit greatly if you had agriculture. Why don't you start doing that? I'll show you how to do that. And then once you get there, this, whatever it is willing to play a very, very long game.
Important role. And then they sacrifice to that entity, and, and it lasts a certain amount of time. And and then
they
it
venerate
repackages
it, they worship
itself.
it. Yeah, they repack. That's the thing too, is like a lot of this is about worship. It's an energetic exchange, right? We all are comfortable with the idea that there are entities that seek to loosh off of us. They put us through an event, and then they eat off that negative energy. But worship and veneration, I think, is the highest form of energy that they want. And so I think it actually becomes very tricky for them, because they're obfuscating their name throughout history. Because if you know their name, then you can cast them out. I think the spiritual realm is incredibly legal. And the reason it's so legal is because there is no physicality in that realm. So it leans heavily on these like spiritual legal principles. And so, I mean, they can't give you their name because they don't want to get casted out. And I think that kind of screws up the ability to get worship from us. They'll take some worship, like worship one of their names. I don't think it's as potent as knowing their true name, but they live a pretty shitty existence in that way.
So Tom Horn speculates that the one is many on the dollar bill is representative of the one God that comes back in many forms through all of time. That, is this like trickster that seeks to gain our supplication.
Yes. I think even the QAnon narrative is part of what we're moving into. And I think that the Q is like Quetzalcoatl, right? The winged serpent, like, Mesopotamia, like, or no, I'm sorry, Mayan mythology. And I think that even that, like, I saw something once and this suddenly resonated with me. And so it's really just a kind of a throwaway terminology. But this idea of like, where we go one, we go all, sounds a lot like the pact that was made on Mount Hermon when they were cast out.
Right. So also when you look at the QAnon, right, it was Hiram Abiff as far as the master mason, the grand architect of Solomon's temple, that basically had a son whose name was Anon, and he was the master of the craft. So this Anon idea, and it links right in with Addis. In regard
That's
to
funny too, because it's also ingrained with like the Kek frog and everything, like the Egyptian god of chaos or whatever it is. All of these things, we're getting so much shit repackaged. Like even that, if people are having a hard time thinking that aliens are just repackaged demonic entities, that's very reductive. But like, that's the kind of the heart of it. You just need to look at like the Pepe the Frog meme and ask why this meme that is like synonymous with chaos and behaves even like one of the plagues of Egypt, right? If you screw up on the internet, the Anons are coming for you. You're gonna get inundated with Pepe frogs until you die.
Frogs, yeah.
And then what do? They're literally saying Kek. Kek is World of Warcraft speak for LOL. And then all of a sudden you find that there's an Egyptian god of chaos called Kek, and it's a frog. Like, and then frogs are even, you know, two gender, like they're dual gender in that way. They kind of move back and forth, or they can. And so there's like this element to it. And then you look at the theme of the culture that we live in right now, and it's centric. I mean, that to me screams rebranding. And I'll dismount on my tangent here. I don't think people have the ability to play that high level of chess. I think the only thing that has the ability to play that high level of chess is something that's been around a lot longer than an individual's lifetime. Yes,
we can just ask Alex Jones about the frogs. I mean, he knows all about it. Lisa, I feel like you were gonna say something a minute ago.
Yeah, it was to your point, Raven, and this ties into what TOPLOBSTA was talking about, the ELF. So the Schumann resonance is considered like the heartbeat of the Earth, and it exists at 7.8 megahertz or something like that. It's extremely low frequency. That's what they call it. But one of the interesting things that they found with the Schumann resonance is that it is not only similar to the alpha brainwaves, it is identical. And so whenever you want to talk about creativity, you want to talk about grounding, or you want to talk about any kind of like connection, that is the connection, is to the Earth, is to the Schumann resonance, to the brainwaves. And so this is the part where you start talking about human consciousness, you start talking about, like a higher self or whatever. I do think that when you intermix these other, what you call not artificial, but manufactured frequencies, whether they are from electronics or they're from what have you, you start to disrupt that. You start to interrupt that, and you cut off the connection itself.
Yes.
And you were absolutely right, in terms of like with some of this technology, it's a scrying screen. It is your, so to speak, your Ouija board just with a keyboard, really.
Right.
You can back
100.
and forth. The other thing is Charles Babbage, who actually invented the first computer back in the 1820s. He did so by summoning the devil, according to, text.
Yeah.
So
Of course
you do have this kind of, and the devil I use loosely, right? Because that could be anything, anybody, any whatever. I think it's the antithesis of your connection with the Earth, your connection with, where you come from, right?
The adversary.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
I do know the gateway tapes is supposed to help you go to that frequency.
Right.
Yeah. Shout out to our buddy Donut. He says that he did the gateway method and then was able to view like something that he thought was the Akashic records. I don't know to what degree. But I think like all of these things, even the Akashic records, or what the gateway program is teaching us, this is, I think in order for us to not understand what inhabits that realm, you first had to remove that realm from our perception. And then after a long time of, psyoping us and propagandizing us, then you can reintroduce it, but you have to reintroduce it in a controlled way. And that controlled way is going to be an arm of, the intelligence agencies, the same ones that are running the programs and everything.
I got a question for you guys, NephilimDSquad.
That's us.
What do you think of like this? The first Nephilim episode I ever did, I brought this up. There was a Netflix series. It was something Graham Hancock bull about
like ancient
the
apocalypse.
flood. Yeah, ancient apocalypse. Okay, but there's bits of truth in there if you just look at it from a different perspective. And for me, it's like the repackaging thing. All ancient cultures talk about the flood. All ancient cultures talk about these beings that showed up. Quetzalcoatl is one of them. And they taught them agriculture. They talked about giants roaming the earth. There's all these megalithic structures all over the world. Nobody knows how they got there. Nobody knows why they are built in alignment with these stars, and and they all practice these like, ancient kind of like sacrificing and doing these things, Babylonian type shit.
Blood rituals.
And so you're right. And it's like, it really is just kind of repackaged throughout cultures, different names for the same type of beings, different So I mean, I think Graham Hancock is probably weaponized against us in a way, because he does come from the Gaia Network too. He was
Right.
on there all the time with David Wilcock and all of them. So I don't know what you guys think about that, but to go along with the theme of like repackaging things, they're selling us the right story. I mean, the flood did happen, but it's like they sell it to us in a way where it's like, well, they're coming back for us, and they're extraterrestrials, and they're ascended masters, and they're XYZ, you know, fill in the blank, whatever it is that you want to call them.
I think that in order to sell a truth, in order to sell a lie, you have to have a lot of truth in there. But
Right.
if you're really good at selling the lie, like I'm famous on Twitter for saying I got on a big appearance on some show, and he was like, you did a tweet and you misled people, and I said, yeah, I fucking lied to the people, and it was easy. It was easy because I told them the truth, but I gave them a little bit of a lie that they wanted to believe, and I did it on purpose to make an example out of stupid people. But that's how you sell the lie. So it's like 99 truths and then one thing, and the one thing is usually something like the original sin or the original lie, where it's like you can be like gods, but and most people don't really even ask the question like God, like sure, I'll eat of that fruit, and then all of a sudden,
Sign
boom,
me up.
now, yeah, sign me up, and now we know how the rest of the story goes. So that's kind of always what it is. So whenever someone's telling me these things, or like we're hearing these stories, they're fascinating, and they're all like true. They all ring very true. You watch a Disney movie, that shit rings very true, but there's always one very specific lie in there, and if you don't know to parse it out, you'll end up believing this stuff and be very confused when, you know, things start to play out in a different way than you expected.
Yeah, they
So
start
you
telling
guys
you
would
that you
say
can be.
like, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say they're telling you that you're special and you could be as gods in one way or another, right? Right now we're exploring this like telepathy kind of angle, and it's like, yeah, we've been inundated with like superhero films and shit because of that in very many ways. Like you watch Avengers, and then when the fucking credits roll, you're like, my life fucking sucks.
Or like, did you
I
guys
can't fly.
watch that Amazon Prime, The Boys? And
Yeah,
like they're
yeah. That's a
injecting
much
these
more
babies and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, that's a much more accurate version of what it would be like if
I
we
think
had
so too.
superheroes.
But so like, let's take Andrea for instance. He's a bad guy in this story, right? I mean, at least I would say so, because it's like Lisa says she uses the term devil, you know, loosely, which you can do, but I do feel like there is darkness and there is light forces, and I think he falls into the camp of tightly being an asshole,
So I
not
would say
loosely.
two things on that. No, number one, just going back to your original question, like, you know, the whole flood mythos. Timothy Alberino, he's a really an amateur archaeologist and a bit of a theologian. I don't agree with everything he says, but something that he brought to our attention on our show, which I did think was fascinating, is the Peruvian government has one explanation as to how their megalithic structures got there. But if you get to the people that are living in a way that is to say they are descendants of the Inca, many of those people have their own ideas, and they will say that a race of giants created, it wasn't even the Inca that created the megalithic structures.
Right,
They found it. A race of giants created the megalithic structures. They were cannibalistic and evil. It's interesting that they even use the word cannibalistic, because that's insinuating that they share some lineage with us, or else it wouldn't be cannibalistic to eat us. But they were doing that, and their overarching kind of head god sent floodwaters to kill them. And so fascinating correlation right there. But as far as is he a good guy or is he a bad guy? You know, when I started this whole conspiracy journey, you have to start to attribute some sort of attributes to like the proverbial they. Who is the they that is pulling all the strings?
Yeah.
Who on earth has the ability to play this long of a con that has this many moving parts? And now all these years later, the juice. Now, all these years later, I'm very comfortable with the idea that like it's compartmentalized, much like a Bob Lazar story when he goes to S2 and he's like, I'm only in charge of propulsion. There are other people in charge of like metallurgy and stuff. We're not allowed to swap ideas. I think the compartmentalization that exists within this structure actually is like a pyramid. Somebody close to the top is communicating knowingly and purposely with entities, but that is a very small group, and some of them are even possessed by them. But the further you go down, there are times when, you know, Top and I on NephilimDSquad find ourselves on a topic or moving culture in a strange way that like we didn't anticipate. Shit goes viral on Twitter. Next thing you know, Milo Yiannopoulos is calling himself a dangerous, which is the namesake of one of our shows. And it's like either we're really good at branding or ideas are alive in some way, and maybe they are disseminated by a spiritual realm. And I think so many of us are not aware of the ways in which we move and how it relates to other things. And so when it comes to Andrej Puharich, I don't necessarily know that he is a bad guy. He might have been told that he's special. He might have been told that it's important what he's doing. And he might have been told that he needs to, you know, spearhead this thing and push it into the culture. For it's very far and few in between that you can get anybody to engage in knowing evil. We're not really like that, human beings. We don't really like evil.
Andrej did exactly what he was supposed to do.
He was an unaware bad guy.
Yeah,
He was
a
aware.
willing dupe.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
one more thing I was going to say before we get off the topic, and we're running out of time, is in the 70s, early 70s, Puharich actually has a patent for the electro decay of water.
I have that too.
Yeah,
this guy,
and he was actually driving around the country.
He's looking at your notes.
He was driving around the country in a motorhome that he had converted to run on water. So this is the earliest story, even before the guy in the 80s that had the car that they say disappeared that ran on water. But yeah, so Puharich seems to be the origin of this running a vehicle on water idea as well. Yeah.
He's dipping his toe into everyone's pond.
You know what, though? It makes me feel bad. It makes me feel like, damn, dude, I'm not inventing shit. I'm literally just telling you stuff that has already happened, that is already existing. I'm researching something that somebody else did research on. Like, damn, this guy, you know, say what you will about him. He was a pioneer. He was a trailblazer. And are we, you know, better for all of the things that he explored? No, probably not. But he certainly explored them first, man. And he certainly was a trailblazer.
Here's a question: would you have liked to interview him or talk to him?
Hell yeah!
For me, it's like
definitely.
100%. Yeah.
Well, Raven, you know, all you got to do to be a trailblazer, I guess, is commune with demons, your neck open, bleed into a cup, feed it to a baby. You know, that's just the basic things. Just right, yeah. Put some mushrooms in your beehole. These are things. These are just the basic things.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. There, Ecclesiastes, right? The book of Ecclesiastes famously says is nothing new under the sun.
Right.
That rings truer and truer every single day of my life. Not even every episode I do. Like every day of my life, I'm exposed to something that has some ancient connectivity. You know, it happened way back in the day. It happened slightly different. And so in that way, whatever Puharich is doing, maybe let's not champion him too much. He's probably just rehashing, and definitely is rehashing old principles, old ideas, old technology. But yeah, I don't know if he's a bad guy. I don't know if I would say the amount of actual bad guys is probably, you know, when they say like the proverbial 1%, of that 1%, there's probably 10%. So I don't know what that, I'm not good at math. Don't make me do it. But I would say of that one, there's probably like 10% that are actually evil. And those people are like, you know, they're channeling, they're communicating.
Aware.
Yes. And some of them are channeling and communicating and still think they're good guys. There is a small subsect of those that are in the know, because there has to be, right? Like we can't be sitting here musing about these things, wondering about whether or not they're rebranding and going to, you know, cast themselves as our saviors and shit. We didn't, that's not, we're not smart. You know what I mean? Like somebody else is smart. And so somebody else at the top has to know that. And I do believe that that's true. I do believe the more and more I look at this, the more I go, oh, this is a rebranding. In fact, our first appearance on Tinfoil Hat, that was the narrative that we were going with, that this is the fallen, you know, because people don't like when you say aliens or demons. It's like in the Bible, they say devils, demons, and unclean spirits. And there's a little bit of nuance there. But I think within those three categories, there's actually much more nuance. It would be a good thing if we could figure out the language to convey that to people, because that narrative of aliens or demons is getting very tired. But that lens of like, I think these are just ancient entities rebranding themselves has just bore good fruit after good fruit after good fruit. We keep finding more and more valid connections. And I know that's also called confirmation bias, but we all engage in that. And to some degree, I have a theory and I'm trying to parse it out and see if there's any veracity to it. And it's the gift that keeps on giving. So I don't think that we found that. I think somebody has to know.
Sure.
Very nice. We're almost about at 2 hours now, so maybe we'll wrap it up here. That was a really long, in-depth, interesting chat. I really appreciate all of you for coming on for that. I mean, there was a lot said here. I think a lot of good stuff. Thank you. Thank you.
This was fun, man.
Hell yeah, it was. Yeah, really like, yeah, maybe we'll do this again one day in the future. It was a lot of good stuff.
I would like to say too, typically like Top does a show with like 5 people. I only do a show with, 2 or 3 and then I get guest. And typically these things are very hard to navigate. You guys do a killer job at this of like allowing everybody to speak, because you get a bunch of people excited about a topic and everybody just wants to shout over each other. I'm guilty of that. Right. Crazy. I always have to reel it in. And so I just want to say this is an excellent conversation. You guys are great. And this really played out nicely. I think it made for a good listening experience, which for a lot of shows isn't always the case when you have this many people, but I think we nailed it.
Oh yeah. No, that is one thing I have to admit with the show. Whenever we have, I mean, we've had more people on than this at a time. It actually goes really well. So yeah, I had a feeling it would work out well today. We'll have to do it again in the future, like I said. Real quick, guys, please plug your stuff. We'll start with you, TOPLOBSTA.
Yeah, you can go to toplobsta.com. That's where I run my merchandising business. So go there, buy a T-shirt, or check us out at NephilimDSquad. That's Nephilim. However you spell that, Death Squad, and we're everywhere. If you like insane racist comedy, you can go to Tower Gang as well, and Dangerous. That's going to be a fun show. We talk to our normie friend who has a very large political audience, and we tell him crazy shit, and then we see what he says.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Raven, you want to add anything?
Yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter. I'm most active on there. That's at David L. Corbo. Corbo, and yeah, go and find NephilimDSquad wherever you can. This is the kind of conversations that we're having regularly on this show, and so if you're a fan of the Occult Rejects, you might find yourself being a fan of NephilimDSquad.
Yeah, highly suggested. Yeah, definitely go check out their channel. I really do think there is topics over there that you find very interesting. That's why I asked them on. And everybody else, you got Jin the Ninja, we got Julia, and we got Robbie Marks. I got all of their links in the bottom now, and if they're not, I will make sure they are after this live, where I'm pretty sure they're there already. Thank you all very much again for joining me. I thought that was, again, an amazing episode. There was a lot going on in the chat. I got lost in there for most of the show. Thank you, everybody who jumped in, especially all the comments from the NephilimDSquad fans and listeners. That's what's up. I was able to see them on my end in StreamYard. A lot of good stuff, man. I really appreciate it, and I'm really glad we went live. And that is the end of another Occult Rejects. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.